Back into Live and Now from Fox, I am Andy Mack. This was the scene just moments ago out of Monroe County as Bryan Kohberger was out of the courtroom in this extradition hearing, and certainly following this one as he faces those 4 counts of first-degree murder back in Moscow, Idaho, and could be back in Idaho in the coming days. To hear more about this and what this hearing means, we're going to be joined now by Brian Silber, a former prosecutor. Thank you so much for joining us here on Live Now from Fox. First and foremost, what can you tell us about what this extradition hearing means and how soon potentially Bryan Kohberger could be back in Idaho?
So the extradition hearing really does not have much to do with the substance of the case. What happens is when a person is located outside of the jurisdiction, here the defendant is in Pennsylvania, there's an Idaho warrant for his arrest. So Pennsylvania took him into custody, but he needs to be extradited from one jurisdiction to another. As everything in our legal system, a person has the right to challenge, a person has the right to ask questions. So the purpose of the hearing is to give the defendant the opportunity, if he so chose, to challenge extradition. Typically, that's a non-go. Not much is going to happen. It's very infrequent to find a poor extradition. But in this case, when it comes to homicide, especially a homicide of this type, I feel like he probably should have challenged it, just because the approach is always attack, attack, attack when you're the defendant in such a case. One of the big questions we have here is, why was this particular person arrested? So far law enforcement has been very quiet about the basis for this arrest. And I feel that if I was representing this individual, I would not miss any opportunity to be asking questions. I don't believe in taking things at face value. He's being given this chance, and he should capitalize on it to make sure that there is justice being done here. But at the end of the day, it is about whether or not it is a valid warrant. It appears to be, and I feel that's why he probably waived any challenge.
And when you waive a challenge like this, potentially that's what we've heard from his lawyer, that he potentially will waive this extradition and be back in Idaho. How quickly does that transpire, and how maybe quickly will he be in a courtroom in Idaho if he does plan to waive this extradition?
So this is not a normal case. This is a very high-profile case with a lot of victims and a lot of victims' family. It's a case that has national attention. They're going to transport him quickly. Under normal circumstances, it can take time. They say the jail bus is the slowest bus in town. And unfortunately, when a person has to get transported from one side of the country to the other, it can take a bit of time. But given the high-profile nature of this case, I expect him to be in Idaho rather quickly.
And we heard not a ton of details from the police there in Idaho. As a former prosecutor, what does that tell you? Because obviously state laws differ from state to state, but in Idaho, you mentioned the fact that there hasn't been a ton of details. How soon will those be revealed, and how maybe soon will all the defendant for Bryan Kohberger know those as well?
This is a major issue with this case. We have 4 victims that were stabbed and cut to death. Basically 4 separate crime scenes, even though they happened in one house. And it's been many, many weeks, I believe a few months actually, since we've heard anything. And law enforcement has been silent. They haven't said any details. They haven't told us the basis for this man's arrest. There's mumblings about DNA, but it wasn't directly his DNA. They've been very quiet. And I got to tell you, as a trial lawyer, I find that troubling. Because usually when law enforcement has a good case against somebody, they parade around their evidence. They're the first ones, for instance, in a major money seizure case, to lay out all the currency on the table. They do a big drug bust. All the drugs are on the table. They get a guy dead to rights. Here's the proof that we have. But in this case, this investigation has been going on for a very long time. We have not heard any details. And it raises a major question. What do they really have on this guy? We have a small law enforcement agency that hasn't investigated a murder in 7 years or whatever it's been. It's not like the New York Police Department is conducting this investigation. They probably have a homicide there every few hours. So it begs a lot of question. Why this guy? Why someone in Pennsylvania? And the more silent they are about it, the louder the question is. And I think this defendant certainly is entitled to answers, and so is the public.
And I think the big point you brought up was also DNA in the car, two key pieces potentially to what the Idaho police are looking into. From your perspective, how big are those two pieces of evidence, from what you're looking at?
The answer is it's yet to be seen. And something the public does not understand until they become a juror in a criminal case is that not all DNA evidence is created equal, okay? Some DNA evidence is very reliable, and other DNA evidence is terribly unreliable. You know, sometimes it can pin the exact person. Other times they're not so sure. And that assumes you have a properly collected, properly stored, and properly tested sample. You know, when you have a local police department in a rural area that has very little homicide experience, it's not uncommon for them to trample on these crime scenes and conduct collection of evidence in a manner that is not forensically sound. You know, this evidence, even if it has a clear-cut answer, may end up being challenged for lack of admissibility because it became suspect. They didn't collect it properly. It was maybe, subjected to contamination, for instance. I'm not saying any of that necessarily happened in this case, but waving the banner of DNA only informs people who don't know much about DNA. It doesn't tell me anything as a trial lawyer. We definitely need to hear more detail. And again, their silence on this issue is troubling. That is a major issue. If they had this guy and the DNA was so good, then why aren't they telling us about it?
Definitely, and hopefully we'll hear from Pennsylvania police in the coming hours, so we'll take it to you here on Live Now from Fox. Another point of this case that continues to captivate a lot of people is the fact that Bryan Kohberger, was a Washington State PhD student studying criminal justice and criminology. What do you make of that?
Absolutely nothing. It means nothing. You know, of course, when law enforcement builds a case against somebody, there's always going to be the element of character assassination. And typically when someone comes from a legal background, especially a criminal background, they always want to say, oh, he knows what he's doing. He knows the law. He knows this. He knows that. The truth is he's a kid in school. He doesn't know anything. I don't care what he's studying. And unless they got more and some kind of context to put it in, so far it means nothing. Now, what it will mean in the end, that's yet to be seen. It could have value. You know, maybe there is something to it. But at this juncture, we shouldn't hang our hat on something so distant. You know, I want to see much harder, clear evidence than something like that.
A lot of questions still unanswered in this case that dates back to November 13th. Thank you again, former prosecutor here joining us on Live Now from Fox, Bryan Silber. We appreciate your time. Any parting thoughts you want to leave with our audience about this case?
Keep your mind open. The man is innocent until proven guilty. And remember this, a conviction is only good if they get the right guy. And if the evidence isn't there, that means that the real person or people who are involved in this could still be out there. It's not about walking someone, as they say. It's about getting a good conviction and a right conviction.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us here on Live Now from Fox. That was some great perspective as we're still following this case very intently here on Live Now from Fox. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Happy New Year.
Thank you, you as well. As we continue on here on Live Now from Fox, this was the live look. Just about half an hour ago, Bryan Kohberger led out of the courtroom, expected to waive that extradition and be back in Idaho potentially sometime soon.